Hope everybody's doing okay. This is Slaves of Satan, part 52. 1 second. Sorry, the cow's getting into something. While this is going to be another shorter video, probably around the same time frame as the last one, possibly even less, it's still very important, and it's also a topic that I haven't really spoke of yet. Well, I've spoken of briefly in other videos, but never specifically a video about it. And I've dedicated a gigantic amount of time to like the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, and one of the most monumental things in that era is Nazism, and people get so focused on Hitler that they don't look at who in my opinion, and a lot of others would agree, was the bigger driving force to Nazism, and that's Heinrich Himmler. Because while Adolf Hitler was the mascot and driving force of it, the face of it, Heinrich Himmler was more of the evil genius mastermind figure that came up with the ideas of the Holocaust, which I also want to point out that the Holocaust meant burnt offering, because this was not something that was specifically about the Jews. This was about anybody that he did not believe was ascending to a higher spiritual level known as the Aryans. And prior to this propaganda about Aryan being white supremacy, because nowadays that is what it mostly means when you hear about it, but it actually specifically was more about a mythological Nordic race. And before I get into Himmler, I want to just talk about what got things started with this Nazism, or what was at least the inspiration, because eventually when I cover Hitler, I'll talk about the entire story behind that. But what actually inspired Hitler was this. It's called The Secret Doctrine, written by one of the wickedest women to ever live, Helena Petrova Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy, and that is what inspired Hitler. He slept beside it. He slept with it beside him every night. And while I would recommend that people really decide for themselves if they can spiritually handle reading these charged books or manuscripts, whatever you prefer to call it. There is a difference, but you do gain insight and knowledge that is pretty much found nowhere. Like towards the end of that book, C even mentions graphene, and that was in 1888 that she wrote that. And well, she says graphite, but it's pretty much the same as graphene, but just graphene is a stronger variant of it. And AI will tell you that it was not mentioned until the 40s. Because I believe that that we are called to fight the enemy, and I believe that a good general studies their enemy, because the powers that be, the hierarchy, what's very sad is that they study the Bible more than almost any Christian does, and that's very sad. So anyways, wait, before I get to this, now she is known as the grandmother of the New Age. You will call Alice Bailey the mother of it. And you have to look at the fruits that these things produce. So one of the first fruits that the New Age produced after it got a lot of momentum was the Nazism, the SS, and all that type of stuff. Okay, so when he was growing up, he was a member of a fencing fraternity. He was a League of Apollo member, which was kind of like a lesser important, smaller pagan organization. Now he joined the Nazis in 1923. Now he studied Germanic mythology. Now, like I was saying, the story that they teach you about Hitler in school is so dumbed down. It's pathetic. Like they make you think that it was just madmen slaughtering people for no reason, and it was all about racism. Now, racism was a part of it, but it was not exactly because of the color. It was because of what they believed to be spiritual essence that came from that specific race. So while it is racist, it goes far, far, far beyond that. Now, he studied the Germanic mythology because part of this was to bring back the worship and power of the old Germanic gods. And there's something else that we see the fruits of: selective breeding and eugenics. Now, eugenics and selective breeding has evolved into things like genetics, 23andMe, in vitro, stuff like that. Now, eugenics was backed by very powerful companies, very rich and powerful men like the Rockefellers, and it's pretty much like you would pick a very healthy, fit, intelligent male, then find a partner that had good qualities and good health, etc. And you would pick a match that you or they believed had the potential and high percentage rate of breeding a successful offspring, is basically what it is. But the evil in this is that it takes away the emotion that needs to be put into sex to begin with, and it perverts sex as something that God gave us to procreate with and make it as a tool for superiority. Now, here it is. He wanted to use this to breed Aryan Nordics because it's far more occult and strange than people think that the whole Nazism thing is. And I'm not focusing on the war or anything. That's not something that I do. If you've been following these, the whole purpose of this series, and it's in building block style, so while the first about 6 videos are bad quality because this was my first time editing any videos, they do need to be watched from the beginning to fully understand the concept, because the whole reason of these is to prove that one big conspiracy has been trickling down and causing all this to happen for years. He is a member of the Thule Society, also known as the German Workers' Party, which was a dark art occult group that Hitler was also a member of, and a lot of the other key figures in the SS. He founded the Ahnenerbe. Now, one of the other things that you really never hear talked about in a traditional setting is that one of the main goals of Nazism was to look for these mythological places, and I've read accounts where they claimed that they did find them. One of the main places they wanted to find was Shambhala, which I've spoken of many times. It's the mythological place in the Tibetan mountains where there's been claims for around 150 years where they say the ascended masters are hiding out. And also, it was places like Hyperborea, Argatha, and many, many, many other places. Now, he partnered up with a guy named Carl Wilgut, and he was pretty much like a king sorcerer type figure that specialized in runes, because all of those symbols that they used, like the SS logo, the black sun, which I'll be talking about later, they are all runes. And you can see some of these rune figures in real life, like the Bluetooth logo. That's a combination of two runes. And the name for Bluetooth was based off an old legendary Viking that was nicknamed that. Or there is a water park, family resort type of place that's in, I think, about half of the states, called Great Wolf Lodge. And the word lodge should already be sounding alarm bells if you are aware of what's been going on in the world for the past several hundred years. And on the carpets all over in these places are runes on the carpet. And to somebody that does not know what these things are and does not know how to pray against these things and use their own spiritual essence to counter it, you can be affected and cursed by these things. Symbols do have power. That's why they've been used constantly for thousands of years, and so no sign of slowing down. They're actually increasing, and they just made them harder for people that don't understand it to look at. Now, he had an $88 million castle called the Wewelsburg Castle, and this is where him and Hitler and their top soldiers performed their rituals at, to give praise and worship and ceremonies doing who knows what to the old Germanic gods. And maybe they worshiped the devil, maybe they didn't, but it all powers him anyways. But there was another major event that happened at this castle later in life, and I'll try to edit the video of him talking about it in this video if I can. Now, I haven't covered him yet because it's something that I plan to do later, and and he's a very sinister, evil man. I would say he was running what I would consider the second most dangerous satanic group that's around, called the Temple of Set. A man named Michael Aquino got kicked out of the Anton LaVey's Search of Satan for being too evil. He started the Temple of Set, and Set was the Egyptian name that they gave the devil, because he claimed that he had a revelation that Satan told him that he did not want to be called by his Hebrew name anymore, that he wanted to be called by his Egyptian name. Now, he was a high-ranking colonel in the government. He went over to Germany on some type of military escapade, and the Willisburg Castle, I believe it's still open, but it was open as a museum at that point. And I believe there's 7 floors to it, and the 6th and 7th floors are usually sealed off to the people. Now, because people get intimidated when they see somebody with government clearance and all these big titles, badges, stuff like that, they feel like they need to let them have their way all the time. So, the 7th floor is known as the Hall of the Dead. It's a pretty creepy looking place. And he wanted permission to go down there. They gave it to him. And he wanted to go down there to see if there was any occult energy that was still left over. And he claimed he liked the vibe. Now, he used the Enochian keys, which I talked about many times. They're a system that was developed by John Dee and Edward Kelly, later expanded on by Aleister Crowley and Samuel Adele McGregor Mathers. Now, he used the 19th key, which is the one that opens the highest level of aether. And he claims, and he wrote this in his newsletter, in the Temple of Set newsletters. He said that when he opened the aether with the 19th key, that Aiwass, which is the entity that dictated the Book of the Law to Aleister Crowley on April 8th, 9th, and 10th of 1904, came down and passed on the mantle of Aleister Crowley to Michael Aquino. And then 2 things happened after that. He came back to the States, and these towers started getting put up that puts these waves out that affects people's mind, which now today has evolved into all these monstrosities like 5G, upcoming 6G data centers, and all this nonsense. EMFs, ELFs, and the other even more sinister thing was this Project Monarch, which was the evolution of MK Ultra, and what it did was fuse MK Ultra with Satanism, and this was used to create altars, which is where there's multiple personalities living inside your head. I had a girlfriend for about 11 months, I think, about 11, when I was younger, that had altars, and it was a very, very different to be around. My mom was even very scared even, but it's something very different that you don't forget. So, and these altars later evolutionized multiple personality disorder to dissociative identity disorder. And I've heard that some people that he did this to had over 200 altars in them. And he did this because he believed that it would make it so nobody could ever get saved. He called this the devil's champion. And that's, like I said, that's the fruits of the secret doctrine. That's the fruits of the New Age. And the AI likes to say this is fictional, but it's not. He was a member of the Vril Society. I've spoken of the Vril a couple times. It was a society that was ran by Maria Orsic. They try to tell you she's fake. She's not. She made She made man-made UFOs in the 20s. I believe around 40 of them, I want to say. And don't get me wrong, there is supernatural ones too, but there's a mixture of government ones, demonic ones, and even God has a UFO. You read about a really crazy one in Ezekiel. So it makes UFOlogy even more hard and confusing to understand. Now, he also followed Ariosophy, which is the Germanic version of Theosophy that was started by Helena Blavatsky, and it's very, very, very similar. The only difference is that it's more Germanic based, Germanic paganism, but the Ascended Masters was still a big focus. He started the Artemin League. He was very interested in witchcraft research, and he also considered himself neo-paganism. And while their goal was to wipe out Freemasonry, because they understood that that was probably the biggest threat to them, not because they run the show, but because of their numbers. While the majority of Freemasons are just the foot soldiers in the world conspiracy. Even the high degrees in the Scottish Rite. But he incorporated a lot of Freemasonry in Nazi Germany. Now he incorporated Rosicrucianism, which is basically Christianity mixed with dark arts mysticism and worship of the sexuality, and something that basically shows up almost 10 out of 10 with all of these people. Everybody, that's basically everyone that's been involved with the dark arts, cult leaders, Satanists, has always, you see the Kabbalah come up. Rather it's the Jewish Kabbalah, Hermetic Kabbalah, or the so-called Christian Kabbalah, which they put with a C, but it's far from Christian. Now, I want to talk about this Black Sun thing, and this is probably the last thing that I really feel like addressing at the moment. This Black Sun, which still is around today, it's a logo of that looks like a sun, but it's a wheel that's based off of runes, and it pretty much represents the darkening of one's soul, and it's used in a lot of left-hand path magic traditions, which is um, a type of black magic that's more of a religion where it promotes things like radical selfishness, being evil as a good thing, um, just everything negative you can think of they embrace. Now, this black sun also, like I said, is Satanism, because he was also surely into Satanism. Just look at the fruits. Even if they don't work, you can be into Satanism and not worship Satan. Or the rock music is satanic. There's that popular song that talks about Black Sun. And I believe the more perverted occult meaning is they're also thinking of it as not just S-U-N, but S-O-N, because Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is known as the light of the world. So Black Sun is like a way of them trying to say that Jesus Christ is nothing, and it's a very horrible thing. And the last thing I want to add, I've spoken about this before in the video I made about Anton LaVey, but there is some Nazi rituals in his third book, the Satanic Rituals, and I believe there's two Nazi rituals in there, and they were co-founded by Aquino. If LaVey was into it before, or if Aquino got him into it, I'm not sure. But what's important to know is that while the Nazism has died and transformed into neo-Nazi white supremacist, all these dark arts from Nazi Germany lives on through many different cults, more modern ones that I haven't really talked about yet. Because even though I'm on 52, I've primarily still stuck to things that happened in the 20th century, and I intend to go further forward and back when I feel needed. And that's all I have right now. Have a good rest of the night.
If not peculiar group. One notable episode in this time frame combined Aquino's military travels with his occult passion was the Wewelsburg working of 1982. Aquino had long been fascinated by the occult aspects of Nazi Germany, strictly from a scholarly and magical perspective. He was particularly interested in the lore surrounding Wewelsburg Castle in Westphalia, which under Heinrich Himmler's SS had been refurbished as a mystical HQ, complete with a circular Hall of the Dead crypt and a plush upper assembly hall with a sunwheel mosaic, often dubbed the Black Sun in the floor. In October 1982, while on a NATO liaison assignment in Europe, Aquino made a pilgrimage to Wewelsburg. With permission from the castle's curator, he gained access to the two legendary chambers that had been off limits for decades, the Open Gruppenführersaal, or the Upper Hall, and the crypt below it. On October 19, 1982, Aquino conducted a private ritual in the castle's North Tower crypt, the so-called Valhalla, or Hall of the Dead, at approximately 3 to 4:30 p.m. This magical experiment, the Wewelsburg working. The aim, as he described in a letter to the priesthood later, was multifold: to tap into any remaining occult energy or resonance left from the intense focus the SS had placed on that spot, and to ritually awaken and reorient the Order of the Trapezoid, an occult order that had existed in prototype within the Church of Satan, and which he now wanted to fully energize within the Temple of Set. Aquino approached the Wewelsburg working with meticulous preparation. He had researched the castle's history and read accounts like Francis King's Satan and Swastika to understand what the Nazis might have attempted there. During the ritual, Aquino used one of the Enochian keys, specifically the 19th key, which, in Dee's system, opens the gates of the deepest ether. He later described an intense, meditative, and visionary experience. In that crypt, he perceived the magical epitaph of Nazi Germany, a realization that the Third Reich, in fighting what it saw as materialism and decadence, had ironically unleashed a dark archetype, the Order of the Trapezoid, symbolizing authoritarian occult power, which could reassert itself in new forms. At one point, he felt as if he had drained the lingering occult battery that the castle represented, leaving it magically inert after 40 years of dormancy. The result for Aquino personally was invigorating. Having drunk at this magical fountain of youth, I myself felt energized, he wrote afterwards. Crucially, Aquino believed that the ritual opened the gate of Wewelsburg, or the Eon of Set. In his esoteric interpretation, the Church of Satan and Temple of Set had already been casting the shadow of an archetype, the trapezoid or the black sun, without fully realizing it. By performing the working at the epicenter of Nazi occult myth, he aimed to consciously take up the archetype and integrate it positively into Setian practice. In effect, the Order of the Trapezoid was reconstituted as a formal magical order within the Temple of Set following this work. It attracted those interested in rune magic, Germanic pagan lore, the metaphysics of geometry. The trapezoid and angles held special significance, aligned with LeVay's old law of the trapezoid, which stated that certain geometric forms can induce magical effects. Aquino even designed a new emblem for the Order of the Trapezoid, a version of the Wolfsangel rune within the trapezoid, reflecting its left-hand path mission. This intersection of Nazi symbol mysticism and Setian practice could have been easily misunderstood, and indeed it sometimes was. However, Aquino consistently clarified that his interest was academic and magical, not political or racial. Interestingly, the Wewelsburg working had ripple effects outside the temple. Occult historian Nicholas Goodright Clark notes that Aquino's ritual sparked a new occult fascination within Wewelsburg in the wider community. The local museum curator, Daniela Seppi, observed that after the Temple of Set's working, many more inquiries and occult tours came, each with divergent teachings, indicating that Wewelsburg had become a sort of magnet in occult subculture. The temple remained fairly known in occult circles, but not to the general public, but that was about to change as the decade progressed. In the mid-1980s,